did the scar makeup on my other eye for my Shredder video because I was like, oh, this will be good practice for Raph's video, forgetting that I would probably be ranking Raph next, so you get a scar 2 videos in a row. Hey there, I'm Torisaur, and today we are ranking all on-screen adaptations of everyone's favorite cool but rude turtle, Raphael. I'm actually putting a disclaimer at the start of this ranking because even more so than every other ranking I've done, this is going to be a very subjective list. Of all Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles characters, Raphael is the most consistently well written. And unlike every other character in this franchise, there isn't a single version of Raphael I have any major issues with. Because of this, there is a very good chance your favorite Raphael will end up pretty low on this list, but that doesn't mean I don't think he's a fantastic character. You could tell me any Raphael on this list is your favorite and I would have no questions as to why you picked him over any of the others. So please give me grace if you think certain Raphaels are lower than they should be, because I almost guarantee that is going to happen. But with that, it basically means this entire video is just going to be me gushing about all the different versions of Raphael, so I hope you enjoy and let's get into it. In last place is Raphael from Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. Since every other Raphael is so strong, Next Mutation Raph finds himself in last simply because he doesn't shine as much as those other versions. I really don't have much to say about him. I think he generally captures the energy of Raph very well within the context of the very wild and quirky show that is The Next Mutation. There's one episode where he gets trapped in a building with Simon Bonesteel, some of Dragon Lord's minions, and a gorilla. Because of course that happens. And the dynamic between Raphael and Bonesteel, specifically in that episode, is really fun.
You've always been a bonehead, and you'll always be a bonehead!
I don't like you.
Oh, bummer! And I was hoping we could go to the arcade together, maybe get some slushies.
The only criticism I could maybe throw at this version of Raph is his relationship with Leo can be kind of exhausting sometimes. It's the classic Raph-Leo dynamic where they argue and fight a lot, but in Next Mutation I don't think it really adds anything of value and it feels like it just exists for the sake of the trope. However, I think most of my frustrations with the dynamic here is that I find Next Mutation Leo to be insufferable, so it has a lot less to do with Raphael's characterization specifically. That said, I still think Next Mutation is the weakest Raphael, but only because the others are so well done that he ends up being kind of forgettable. In 9th place, I have Raphael from Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The biggest reason Batman vs. is my favorite TMNT movie is because every Ninja Turtles character is a fantastic adaptation, and Raphael is no exception. They do a great job of capturing the conflict between him and Leo in small moments, like the little argument they have at the start of the film, or Raph ignoring Leo and charging in to save the hostages without thinking it might be a trap. I appreciate the film acknowledging this tension without making it the main focus of the story because there are a lot of other interesting things going on. As much as the scene with Batman getting mad at the turtles and telling them to leave felt like unnecessary tension and a kind of unnecessary scene, it does showcase Raphael really beautifully with the speech he gives Batman about sticking with his family despite them getting on his nerves.
We're a family, and learning from your mistakes together is how a family works.
Unfortunately, of the 4 turtles, Raphael definitely stands out the least. Leo gets a small arc about overcoming his fears of losing his family, Donnie gets a lot of focus particularly with Batgirl and coming up with plans to stop the villains, and Mikey's personality carries the entire movie. While Raph still does have a lot of fun lines and interactions with the other characters, he just doesn't get as much as I wish he did. It's also a crime that Raph didn't get to swear in this movie. It's already rated PG-13 because of the blood, so let him drop a son of a bitch or shit at least. Generally, I think Batman vs. Raph is a really solid depiction. He just simply gets overshadowed in the same way that Next Mutation Raph does, but he's still a step up from Next Mutation Raph and gets a bit of focus that saves him from the bottom. In 8th place is Raphael from the 1990 live-action trilogy. It hurts to put 1990 Raph so low on this list because he is genuinely such a fantastic Raphael, but unfortunately so are the other 7 Raphaels that I ranked above him. That said, I think 1990 Raph is easily the best turtle and one of the best parts of these films. Part of the reason for this is they gave one of Leonardo's storylines to him instead. The main character How am I supposed to do quotes with this? The main character, that looks really dumb. The main character of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is generally all 4 of the turtles together. However, in most versions, Leonardo tends to adopt a bit more of a main character role, as most of his focus and development is intertwined with the main story. One such storyline is the classic Leonardo gets thrown through a window and needs to recover at the Northampton farmhouse, most prominently adapted in the 2003 and 2012 animated shows. However, for the 1990 film, they instead gave this storyline to Raphael. I think the way way they used Raphael's anger to lead him to get jumped by the foot was pretty well done. I love the way this anger is previously established through things like him getting worked up over losing a side, the conversation Splinter has with him addressing his issues, and Raph storming off and fighting Casey. The amount of focus Raph gets in the first film pretty effectively establishes him as the main character, so much so that the song in the credits mistakenly calls him the leader.
Raphael. He's the leader of the group.
But another part of why I think 1990 Raph is such a great version is what they do with him in the third film. Despite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, sometimes referred to as Turtles in Time, being one of the weakest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, it does have some genuinely great moments, including Raphael's relationship with a little boy named Yoshi. Raph serves as such a positive influence in Yoshi's life for the brief time they interact, encouraging him to be a kid and play instead of being so quick to grow up and fight, as well as comforting him when he's very upset.
Fighting's for grown-ups, and that's only if you got no other choice. You should be out having fun.
One of my favorite characteristics we see explored with Raphael is his softer emotional side, and there are several more examples in other versions that make him a great character in the same way as 1990 Raphael. Despite 1990 Raph being so close to the bottom of my list, he embodies the character beautifully and is one of my favorite parts of the 90s live action trilogy. At number 7, I have Raphael from the 2007 animated film TMNT. I really struggled with choosing between 1990 and 2007 Raph because they hold a very similar place in my heart. In all honesty, the tiebreaker was the existence of the Night Watcher because I think he's so cool. The idea of Raphael turning to vigilantism because of his strong sense of justice paired with feeling abandoned by Leo and his team makes so much sense for his character, especially because Splinter is so insistent on not interfering with the world of man despite injustice running rampant. I honestly can't blame Raph for going to the extreme of taking up the mantle as a vigilante. Not only is the Night Watcher badass, but represents the tough guy front that Raph puts up in order to cope with his sense of abandonment. I do have a lot of issues with the 2007 film which become even more apparent every time I rewatch it, one of which being the way it sort of paints Leo in the right and Raph in the wrong, even though Raph's feelings are completely valid because Leo disappearing for over a year was some bullshit. Not that there isn't growth to be had on Raph's part when it comes to his anger, and the Night Watcher definitely wasn't a healthy coping mechanism, but Leo is just as, if not more problematic with his attitude and the way that he's been put up on this pedestal by Splinter. I could rant about Splinter's bullshit and the way he treats Raph all over again. If you want to see that, you can go check out my Splinter ranking. But I think part of why I have a soft spot for 2007 Raph over 1990 Raph is the disservice that the film does him. And because he deserves so much better, I think he also deserves to be put a little bit higher. I think 2007 Raphael is by far the best part of TMNT, and the only reason I think it's still a good movie because the rest of it is kind of a mess. In 6th place is Raphael from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For a long while, Rise Raph was actually really high up on my list for favorite turtles in this franchise, but over time he's gradually fallen lower simply because he doesn't match what I like to see for Raphael as a character generally. However, I still think he has a really interesting approach to Raphael that still feels true to the foundation of the character while still giving it a unique spin. In Rise, Raph is the oldest and self-appointed leader of the team, and having this intense responsibility shifts his personality away from the typical angry argumentative characterization and towards a more concerned, overprotective one. I honestly don't think this change is that different from a typical characterization, as I think most other Raphaels would develop a personality very similar to Rise Raph if they were in his position. It's made clear throughout this franchise that Raph's primary characteristic isn't necessarily being angry, but emotional and overprotective of his family. Very often this manifests itself as anger, but at his core, Raphael is a protector. Rise of the TMNT examines what it would look like if Raph's role as the protector was amplified by the responsibility of being the eldest brother and leader of the team. He doesn't have the luxury of outbursts of anger like the other versions of him do, and instead bottles up those feelings in order to look after his family. We do get some small glimpses into Raph's anger, such as his frustration with his brothers and Pizza Puffs, but especially in the series finale when he feels helpless to defeat Shredder and protect his family.
Don't eat that.
Oh, yeah, gross. It's been on the floor.
And it's poison!
I earnestly believe Rise Raph is the perfect representation of an alternate universe, a what if where Raphael is the leader from the beginning. Rise Raph also maintains the very impulsive, solve problems with your fists mentality that we see from all other Raphaels as well. Man vs. Sewer explores Raph's fear of being alone, which is something other Raphaels definitely have as well, though they've committed themselves to burying it much more effectively through the front of being a loner that doesn't need or care about anyone else. But outside of of all the ways that Raph still aligns with the typical characterization, he just has a really endearing personality. He's not the brightest, but is still very passionate and loving, and still finds moments to be silly with his brothers despite his responsibilities. Again, I do think Raph is more similar to his typical characterization than many people let on, but those differences definitely still exist that make me generally prefer other versions. However, Raph is still a fantastic take on the character, and his personality is delightful. In 5th place is Raphael from the 1987 animated series. 1987 Raphael is one of, if not the most unique interpretations of Raph, because he doesn't have the typical angry, violent tendencies we see with all other versions. He's just kind of an asshole, and I say that very lovingly because his sass and one-liners are so iconic and charming.
You're turtles, remember?
So that's why I'm green. And I always thought it was something I ate.
I owe you one. You owe me 6, but who's counting?
Do you turtles get the feeling that there's something, not right about Master Splinter?
I've always had that feeling. He's not only from medieval Japan, but also from an alternate universe. So naturally, he speaks English.
They'd been knocked unconscious.
Wrong. We passed out from boredom.
Vernon doesn't know anything about being a hero.
So? He doesn't know anything about being a reporter either. I hate to say this, guys, but it looks like we turtles are boxed in. You're right, but I had to say it.
Everybody hates me!
No, little dude. Honest.
Well, hold on. I hate him.
Part of what makes 1987 Raphael so fantastic is his voice. Rob Paulsen has such an iconic delivery that adds so much to the enjoyment of this character. And not to flex or anything, but I did actually get to meet him and the other Turtles plus April's voice actors last year, and they were all so sweet and a joy to talk to. But what I really appreciate about Raphael in this series is that he's rude, but he's not mean. Especially with the episode Raphael Knocks Him Dead showcasing his love for comedy and stand-up, it's very clear that whenever he makes a dig at someone, it's all for the bit and lighthearted fun. And the only people that he approaches earnestly insulting, like the Shredder or Vernon, deserve it.
He could mutate into some grotesque creature.
In Vernon's case, that could be an improvement.
Very often in Raphael-centric episode, we also get to see a bit of a softer side to him where he isn't constantly dropping these sassy little quips. The biggest reason 87 Raph is towards the middle of my list is because we don't get that exploration of his anger that makes such a compelling character study for Raphael in this franchise. However, his personality is so enjoyable that he makes up for the lack of that storyline and is still a fantastic character. At number 4, I have Raphael from the 2010s live action films. It's kind of absurd how well Raphael is written in these movies that are kind of infamous for character assassination.
That's Officer Jones. And I'm gonna be a detective someday.
But they do such a great job at mixing angry, violent Raph with loving, emotional Raph in the first movie alone. We of course see Raph being a fighter, always charging into a fight head-on, facing Shredder alone to rescue his brothers after jump scaring the shit out of Vernon as he should. However, the end of this film has one of the best representations of Raphael's heart through the speech he gives to his brothers when they fear they're going to die.
I'm sorry I was so hard on you. Every time I pushed you, I threatened you, I yelled at you, I pushed you beyond your limits because I believe in you. And every time I talked about walking away, it was because I was scared. I just didn't think I was good enough to stand next to you and call you brothers and say to you, I love you. I love you guys so much!
The speech is largely played for comedy and kind of making fun of Raphael for being emotional, which is kind of a product of this type of movie, unfortunately. However, I think it is such a beautiful reflection of Raphael's depth and how much his family means to him. Out of the Shadows also does fun things with this character. In one of my favorite scenes, Mikey describes him like
a big, cuddly teddy bear. If big cuddly teddy bears were incredibly violent.
Which is such a perfect description. We also get Raph absolutely freaking out at jumping out of a plane, and Raphael having some kind of crippling fear like Bugs in the 2003 and 2012 series, or Mrs. Cuddles in Rise, is always so much fun. Raph being a loving person at his core is a great subversion of the tough guy archetype in a meaningful way, whereas him having an intense fear is a great subversion of the archetype in a really silly way. As much as this plotline kind of annoys me because Leo is a bitch about it, we get even more emotional depth with Raph and Mikey going behind his back to get the mutagen that could potentially turn them human, with their desperation to grasp an opportunity to experience the world without needing to hide. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of that plotline nor how it's resolved, but it gives me an even greater appreciation for the surprising amount of depth that Raph has in these movies. Moving into my top 3, in third place is Raphael from Mutant Mayhem and Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Raph didn't make much of an impact on me in Mutant Mayhem. I thought he generally captured Raphael well, but because the film was about the Turtles as a group as opposed opposed to their characterizations individually, he didn't particularly stand out above any other Raphael. However, Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did an amazing job of showcasing the turtles individually, and season 2 especially pushed Mutant Mayhem Raph all the way into my top 3 Raphaels. The main reason I adore this version of Raphael is he feels like if you took 1987 Raphael and gave him a more typical violent, angry characterization. Like I mentioned earlier, 87 Raphael is incredibly iconic and hilarious with his sarcastic personality, but he's lacking that emotional fighting spirit that gives Raphael such depth in other versions. Mutant Mayhem Raph takes that angry, violent characterization and pairs it with 1987 Raphael's personality, which creates such a beautiful blend of those two approaches and makes him such an interesting and fun character.
What day of the week are chickens afraid of?
Don't say Friday.
Friday!
What is that supposed to be? Like I'm honestly asking. You made that on purpose?
I think the way they handle his anger specifically is pretty unique as well, because there's a really nice balance of it being played up for comedy, but also showcasing the way it weighs heavily on him at times.
Talk! I dream about fighting every night.
You've got a rage problem, right?
That's not a problem.
Just honk.
Only an idiot honks in a... What? Oh, come on.
Come on! You act like me wanting to fight all the time is a bad thing. Like, is this all my fault? Like, do you think fighting is bad?
He also shows a lot of love and care for his brothers in both the movie and the series. Although not as long or dramatic as in the 2014 film, he also gives a little speech when he and his brothers are about to die that I adore.
I know I said your faces were the last things I wanted to see before I died, but, you know, now that we're actually about to die, there's nothing I'd rather be looking at.
And this moment isn't played as a joke at Raph's expense like the other speech, which I really appreciate. Overall, I think Mutant Mayhem Raph might be the best balance of all versions of Raphael across the franchise. And I think if he had the opportunity to be more substantially explored, like the next two Raphaels I'm going to talk about, I think he would likely become my favorite because he is so well done. In second place, I have Raphael Yo Mama Splinterson from the 2003 animated series.
This is some nice steel. How about telling me who gave them to you?
Yo mama.
The 2003 series has one of, if not the best collective ensemble of the Turtles, which of course means that Raphael is fantastic. He encapsulates so many of the Raphael characteristics that I adore really effectively. We of course have his anger and tendency for violence explored beautifully in one of the earliest episodes of the series with the introduction of Casey Jones, and their friendship is immediately so iconic. And 2003 Raph's conflict with Leo specifically is my favorite in the franchise because of how similar the two of them are to one another. On top of this anger, we of course have that iconic Raphael sass. This very often manifests itself in the way he pokes fun at Michelangelo all the time.
There's one for each of you, and I'll just be odd turtle out.
You're telling me. Is it possible your brother has grown even more annoying since last we met?
It's a rare gift.
Yeah, and I wish we could exchange it.
I generally love his relationship with Mikey because the way the two of them are constantly poking fun at each other as their way of showing love is adorable, honestly. It's also very reminiscent of the relationship I have with my older sister. Like, the way I say I love you to her is by calling her a bitch and ugly and that I hate her, to which of course she responds, no you. It does bother me how later in the show, fast forward and back to the sewer in particular, this banter starts to come off as Raph just bullying Mikey, which I hate. But even then, there is always this sense of Raph being super protective of Mikey, which I adore. And this of course ties into the third big thing we see with Raph in the series, that being his big heart. After Leo gets infamously chucked through a window, and while recovering his brothers recount stories from their childhood, Raph is the only one that visibly cries at seeing his brother in a coma. One of my favorite filler episodes is Touch and Go from season 3, because its B-plot centers around Raphael supporting a blind old woman and her cat Lucy, helping her cover rent now that her husband is gone. 2003 Raph is an all-around fantastic interpretation along with the rest of the 2003 series cast. My favorite version of Raphael comes from the 2012 animated series. Ironically, I actually hated 2012 Raph when I first started watching this show, because in the first couple episodes in particular, he reads as a huge asshole. This is partially because this was only the second version of TMNT I had ever watched after Rise of the TMNT, in which asshole is not even close to a word I would use to describe Rise Raph. So I was experiencing a lot of whiplash with those different characterizations, but also upon rewatching watching the series, the first couple episodes just really make him look like much more of a jackass than he is for the rest of the show. We especially see this in his relationship with Mikey. In a very similar way to 2003 Raph towards the end of his series, 2012 Raph in Rise of the Turtles just reads as straight up bullying Mikey as opposed to teasing him like an older sibling.
That worked pretty good.
Of course it did. Would you want to look like Mikey?
I'm right here.
Fortunately, that is not a dynamic that lasts, and for the rest of the series, he and Mikey have such a great relationship that is occasionally accentuated by making fun of each other. There are also so many genuinely heartwarming and loving moments between them that make their dynamic one of my favorites in this franchise. 2012 Raphael also has the only romantic plotline that an on-screen turtle has gotten that actually feels like a productive exploration of his character. I've mentioned her in videos before, but one of my mutuals, Fabulous, makes a lot of really great videos talking about Raph and Mona Lisa's relationship, and what it reveals about Raphael specifically. A recent one of hers that I loved is the discussion of Raph's reaction to Mona Lisa saying I love you to him for the first time, and how it has such an immediate effect on him because it goes against this belief he's held for such a long time that he and his brothers are incapable of finding love because of what they are. And as much as the way Donnie and April's relationship was written is a whole mess, Raph was always really good at being supportive but realistic. At one point he's brutally honest and tells Donnie he has no shot with April, but then turns around to hype him up to April at the end of the episode to make up for it. And in A Foot Too Big, when Donnie is bummed out at April not liking the music box he made for her, Raph attempts to cheer him up by distracting him with some training. Raph's fear of cockroaches is another thing I love about him, not only because of the subversion of the tough guy trope, especially in the way it's used for comedy, but it also serves as a narrative with Raph directly facing his fear in Cockroach Terminator and again in the Insecta Trifecta. Though I'm not a biggest fan of the latter for certain reasons. I could keep rambling on, but I think overall 2012 Raph does the best job at capturing the heart of Raphael and all the reasons he behaves the way he does in a very meaningful way. That's it for the ranking, but before we go, it's time for me to talk about my version of Raphael from my own Ninja Turtles AU TMNT Genesis. The last couple Genesis info dumps I did were very long because they were covering Splinter and Shredder's backstory, which also tied into yapping about major story beats. But this one's gonna be a lot shorter because it's mostly a discussion of Raph's personality and relationships with the other characters. I decided to make Raphael the youngest of the turtles at 14 because I thought the idea of a youngest sibling struggling to live up to his other siblings' capabilities could tie into his anger and angst in a really interesting way, as well as him needing to grow and overcome his anger, tying into him being the least mature of the turtles as well. I want Raph's journey to be the most distinct of any other version of Raphael, with 3 main stages of his characterization, starting off the series acting out a lot and being even more angsty than we've ever seen Raphael before, then flowing into a space where he's managing his anger better but still struggling a bit, with a personality akin to 2003 or 2012 Raph, before finally becoming a more easygoing, lighthearted personality along the lines of 1987 or Mutant Mayhem Raphael, probably not to the same extent as those two, but approaching that characterization, and still maintaining his love of fighting. This growth also ties into the rocky relationship he has with Leo. At the beginning, it is basically the peak Raph-Leo beef where they're constantly arguing and fighting, and just do not understand each other at all. Seeing Leo succeeding as the leader without seeming to need to try at all is really frustrating for Raph, and ties into his inferiority complex. Plus there's of course the typical shit that we see Raph and Leo fight over, with Leo being more dedicated to the rules and training, and Raph just kind of wanting to do whatever and diving headfirst into a fight. Eventually both Raph and Leo go on their own journeys of self-discovery, which helps them to better understand each other and actually celebrate each other's differences. Particularly at the start of the series, Raph is very much a loner, but is the closest to Mikey. It is a very typical Raph-Mikey dynamic, but instead of Raph being the teasing older brother, that instead falls to Mikey, and Mikey takes on the role of trying to bring Raph out of his shell more when Raph tries to be all emo. They also get along well because of the way neither of them really like to abide by the rules, and they kind of share a similar insecurity about not feeling like they're living up to Splinter's expectations in the same way as Leo and Don. Because Donnie is the oldest, there is a bit of a disconnect between him and Raph sometimes struggles with feeling babied by Don. Part of the reason they struggle to connect is because Raph is so driven by his emotions while Don is driven by logic. However, Raph does eventually get insight into the way Don is also a very emotional person when he sees an outburst of anger from Don over something. And the reason Don relies on logic so heavily is because he struggles with managing his emotions and he would rather just kind of bottle them up. And so Raph and Don help each other find a balance between bottling up all your emotions and letting your emotions control you. Raph also has a huge soft spot for animals and is really good with them. And so another way that that Donnie tries to connect with Raph is by sharing animal facts with him that he thinks Raph would find interesting. Speaking of Raph's love for animals, the Hamato family's pet rat Nezumi is the closest to Raphael. Nezumi spends significant time with all of the turtles and Splinter, but generally speaking, Raphael is her home base. I haven't really thought about the room situation for the turtles, like if any of the turtles share a room or if they each have their own, but Nezumi would sleep in Raph's room or by his bed and would have a cute little home set up for her there. Raph generally keeps quiet and does not like talking about his feelings, but will often vent to Nezumi about things, almost like talking to a diary, and Nezumi in turn does her best to comfort Raph. Splinter struggles to connect to Raphael in the way a lot of parents struggle to connect with their angsty teens, especially with Raph's "you can't tell me what to do" attitude. Eventually, Splinter sits down and tells Raph a story about his own anger issues. I somehow forgot to mention this in both my Splinter and Shredder videos, probably because there were a million other things I had to cover in those. But when Yoshi first comes to the Oroku clan, he and Saki did not get along. They were each other's ops and were constantly fighting all the time, eventually leading to some massive fight between them that the Oroku clan punishes them for. And by being punished together with certain chores and tasks to complete together, Saki and Yoshi were eventually able to bond and overcome their differences and then become the best of friends. Splinter tells Raph this story to help him show that he's not alone with his feelings, but it is also possible to overcome them and forge better connections with those around him. This likely would be in the same sort of episode as Casey Jones' introduction, since when Raph and Casey meet, they are immediately butting heads, but eventually become best of friends. Obviously, Raph and Casey have a great relationship, but in TMNT Genesis, Raph very much looks up to Casey like an older sibling. A reminder is that Casey is 3 years older than Raph, and so Raph very much looks up to them and thinks they're the coolest person ever. I do sort of want to do a classic Casey Jones intro where they're doing vigilante shit and then Raph comes across them and then they fight whatever, but I'm also kind of tempted to spin it on its head where instead of Casey being out of control, it's Raph, though I also don't want to undermine how kind of unhinged and violent Casey is as well through that, because that is such a staple of Casey Jones as a character. That's honestly something I probably will figure out when I do eventually get around to properly writing out the story. But in general, Casey is like an older sibling to Raph that he aspires to be like. April and Raph aren't super close. Most of the time they spend together is when they are sparring with Leo, but Raph also meets Mona Lisa through April, so I kind of want to have her be an older sister wingman for Raph when he and Mona get together. And speaking of Mona Lisa, I'm going to dive into her story real quick. Because there are only 2 on-screen adaptations of her, I won't be doing a ranking for her, and thus it makes more sense to talk about her here. But Ramona Lisa Hernandez starts off as a human girl at April's school, and she's a freshman in high school but is really smart and is in a lot of advanced classes, one of those classes being AP Chemistry with April and Irma. Ramona has a big personality. She is very high energy, sarcastic, and lighthearted. She is the most similar to 1987 Mona Lisa, but a bit more chaotic and immature because instead of being a college student, she is 14. One day, the AP Chemistry class is taking a field trip to TCRI, and April seizes this opportunity to try to sneak around and get some extra intel for the turtles. Ramona, also being the chaos gremlin that she is, decides to sneak around and try to look at things because she's like, chemistry is cool, biochemistry is cool, I want to see what they're doing here. And also she possibly spies April sneaking off and is like, I don't know what she's doing, let's find out. So eventually Ramona bumps into April and April is like, now I gotta babysit this girl, god damn it. But they stick together and keep looking around, and Ramona stumbles across a file on Irma, and April sees it and assumes that this means Irma is being targeted by TCRI. This would be one of the earliest indications that something is going on with Irma, and she's a little bit suspicious. Eventually, the Utrom are alerted to April and Ramona sneaking around, and because April is already known to be an enemy of theirs, they're like, we're attacking on sight. Now, Ramona isn't necessarily a fighter, but she does do gymnastics, and so she holds her own pretty well in this fight, but during it, she accidentally makes contact with some mutagen and turns into a giant mutant salamander. Initially, Ramona is like, hell yeah, this is so cool, and she kicks ass, but after a while, she eventually realizes this is now her permanent state of being, and it is very upsetting for her. The fight eventually ceases because April explains to the Utrom, hey, I'm part of this field trip group, and if 2 of the students on this field trip go missing, y'all are gonna be in a heap of trouble, and it's already gonna be bad enough that Ramona mutated, and so April and a now mutated Ramona are escorted back to the group. And this, of course, becomes really bad press for TCRI on the news, where they had a field trip there and then some girl got mutated while she was there. And because of this, Ramona steps away from school for a while because she is kind of deeply ashamed of her new form. There might even be something where she's not allowed back in school, I'm not sure. But she is just at home all the time and is very depressed. The last time April sees Ramona, she gives her a communication device of some kind and tells her to use it if she ever wants to get in contact with others like her, of course referring to the turtles, if she is ever ready to take that step, which Ramona does not do right away. She is not interested in that and just kind of wants to wallow in her own existence for a bit. But when it comes to actually meeting the turtles, I'm not sure if I want it to be specifically that she just decides to finally use the communication device, or if she at first sees Raphael on the rooftops or something and was like, what the hell is that? I want to go investigate it, and then gets a sense for adventure with him and eventually, you know, joins the team as an ally. Either way, Ramona does eventually join the turtles as an ally and adopts the name Mona Lisa as her mutant name. She is immediately drawn to Raphael for a few reasons. Part of it is Raphael being the youngest, she relates to the idea of needing to live up to everyone's expectations, with her being in advanced classes as a freshman in high school that she feels she kind of has to live up to everyone else that's older than her. And because she's also fascinated by how moody and angsty he is and is determined to make him laugh. Raph initially finds Mona Lisa to be obnoxious and annoying, but after the two of them go on their own little adventure together, they get to know each other better and kind of start having a little romance. Her dumb jokes go from annoying to endearing, and Raph discovers that he actually really likes comedy from this relationship. And Raph starts using witty remarks more as a way to express himself as opposed to punching and yelling. Right now, a lot of Genesis Raph's growth as a character is tied to his relationship with Mona Lisa, which I'm not the biggest fan of because having a character's growth reliant so heavily on a separate character, especially in a romantic relationship, is really not my favorite. However, I also think there is value in a love story where someone wants to be better and be happier for the sake of someone that they really care about. So right now I just need to find a way to balance Mona Lisa helping Raph grow without being the sole facilitator of his growth. As far as the Raph-Mona dynamic, it is very similar to 1987 Raph-Mona, largely because Genesis Mona Lisa is so similar to her 1987 counterpart, and Genesis Raph is gradually becoming more similar to 1987 Raphael. My voice claim for Genesis Raph is Steven Yeun, more specifically a similar voice to Steve Palchuk from Tales of Arcadia because of that more teenager sound, but a bit less dumb jock and a bit more angsty teen because that's exactly what Genesis Raph is.
Look in the mirror, Eli. What do you see? A pair of cool dudes. Tell me something, barf bag. Is your sister seeing anybody? Dude, I'm keeping the carts busy while having a righteous time. Not to brag, but my career prediction test said that I'd make an awesome exterminator.
But that does it for this video. Which version of Raphael is your favorite? Did they make it pretty high on the list, or were they unfortunately stuck towards the bottom? I'm not exactly sure who I'm gonna rank next. I know I still have to cover Baxter Stockman, Krang, and the Purple Dragons, and of course Michelangelo, but I think I'm gonna save him for last so that we can wrap up this series with the final of the Turtles. But I will eventually put up a poll for the next character ranking, so make sure to subscribe to catch that poll and that video when they do come out. The LEGO Technodrome is still up on LEGO Ideas if you want to support it. It's completely free to do, and the link is in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hype if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.